AI and the job market. Data, not feelings. So what are our data sources? So we look into time series data for forecasting, which explores the labor force in the UK. We look at unemployment statistics and earnings for different types of graduates or non-graduates. You find a link to my GitHub repository down below in the description, which provides access to some of the data. Prediction is very difficult, especially if it's about the future. Now, when it comes to the economic benefits, the estimates are quite optimistic. When you look at industry reports, so for instance, the McKinsey Global Institute assumes that the additional global economic activity is about $13 trillion by 2030. So this means an additional 1.2% of GDP growth every year. In a similar way, PricewaterhouseCoopers assumes there's an increase of 14% by 2030. When you look at the empirical studies and reviews of studies, the picture is a little bit more mixed. But usually the agreement is that from an economic perspective, there are broad economic benefits. However, there will be some job losses, but they are compensated because there is overall positive economic growth. So usually you would assume that there is some displacement, so old industries will suffer. However, there is compensation, you have the emergence of new industries. So combined, this compensation is usually stronger than the displacement. So this goes under creative destruction. So this is classic Schumpeter argument. Then there is endogenous growth theory, which means that innovation drives productivity. Productivity in turn increases growth, which then of course translates into higher employment. So again, you would assume that innovation would be beneficial overall. Then there are various ideas about how this will play out when you look at different types of jobs. So there is one argument in the literature that talks about a skill-biased innovation and routine-biased innovation. So usually this literature would argue that routine or unskilled jobs lose while cognitive and skilled jobs win. Polarization argues that the middle is squeezed, so low-wage jobs might benefit because they're not attractive enough to substitute, so you wouldn't have as many applications of new technology in this case. And also high-wage jobs benefit because productivity goes up. The middle-wage jobs, they are more at risk. All of these effects are then driven by the market mechanism. Yeah, so prices change, demand is changing, so you see an adjustment because of that. And this is also labeled compensation theory. Now, when it comes to machine learning AI applications, I believe that the assumption that routine, unskilled jobs will go is not really supported that strongly, because we see more and more applications that might target higher skilled jobs. So for instance, big data specialists should be in demand, fintech engineers, AI and machine learning specialists, and the losers are people that do more clerical work. And also, interestingly, accountants. But of course, nobody likes accountants, so it's not a big loss. There is certainly a shift going on, which is partly driven by AI, by automation, for instance, in data collection, data analysis. So that explains some of these movements, but some is also due to changes in distribution channels. Yeah, even more use of the internet, marketplaces. So marketing and sales is changing, printing, publishing is changing, fintech is emerging. And some is driven by the green transition. Yeah, so this is mostly driven by policy changes. It's very clear historically that certain occupations, certain jobs decline long term, but they also seem to stabilize. Now, this is based on UK data for jobs in mining. And of course, you see a very dramatic drop in the number of people employed, but then it seems to really stabilize for quite an extended period of time. However, sometimes jobs completely disappear. Yeah, so I'm not sure whether you're familiar with the knocker-upper. So this was a job before the use of alarm clocks, so people going around houses and waking up people. So when you look at the graduate wage premium, so this is basically the additional income you get as a graduate compared to non-graduates, you see a decline over time. So initially in 2007, it was about a 50% increase in wages. Now this is down to about 35%. This is based on UK data. If you do a master degree, again, you get a premium, but this is a lot smaller, so about 20%, and also seems to decline over time. Now, there are various factors behind that. So one factor is certainly the change in minimum wage, which benefits low-skilled labor. There are other effects happening at the same time, so also changes in industry structure and so on. Potentially at the end of the period, also changes in AI and machine learning. So this is taking the non-graduate unemployment rate minus the graduate unemployment rate in the UK, you see that the benefit of having a university degree also goes down over time. So in general, the job market has improved for non-graduate roles. Now that's another interesting effect. In fact, in the US, you even have now negative territory. Now, whether this is only driven by AI and machine learning, I doubt it very much. There are other factors at play as well, but certainly there are contributing factors. There is a huge increase in the output of research, but it does not always mean there is more innovation, and it doesn't really mean you have more impact on productivity. When you look at research outputs, there's another big shift happening, which is quite astonishing. And here we talk about quite a short period of about 20 years, from 2003 to 2022. When you look at research outputs, so these are outputs from universities and research institutes in the US, in China and India, you see a tremendous shift. Now this is output compared to the total world output. So at the beginning of the period, the US accounted for about 27% of total outputs, China for about 7%, India for 2.5%. But look at what is happening over time. China completely overtook the US. And in the last years, India is expanding quite tremendously. So there's a significant shift going on in terms of research output, in terms of geographic location. Again, this is something to investigate further in a different video. If you have any questions or suggestions, please leave a comment below. Now, what should be your strategy here? In terms of the job market, it's getting quite difficult to predict, but end of the day, it's a combination of factors that certainly are beneficial. One is to think more carefully about transferable skills, to think about also the need for career changes. So the likelihood that you are in the same career forever is increasingly going down, and also of course you will change jobs much more frequently, and you will notice this already when you think about your parents or grandparents generation. So in the case of my father, for instance, he had 2 job applications, got 2 offers, took 1 job, never changed, and retired. Now that's not happening in my case for sure, certainly not. And in future, I would assume it's even more unpredictable. I think one shouldn't understate the importance of social capital and networks apart from human capital. And of course, all these nice technologies are opportunities as well. In terms of automating processes, you can run a business with less costs, with less staff. You can scale much faster. You can use marketplaces, which we do all the time. You have access to computing facilities through cloud computing. You don't have to invest in heavy IT equipment. So there are many positives as well, which enable you to start a business with virtually no capital. And this is quite astonishing as well. I see you next time.